She showed up at my fence at sunrise, bulldozers already roaring behind her, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "Your wife's been dead for years, darling. Time to modernize and join the real world. Your cows can graze elsewhere, sweetie. Progress waits for no one." That was the moment Cordelia Whitmore made the worst mistake of her life. My name is Dutch Kellerman, third-generation cattle rancher, 47 acres, 30 registered Black Angus, and one 2,200-pound bull named Taurus who had owned that pasture for 6 years straight. What Cordelia did not know is that I had already spent 3 months training that bull to charge at the exact sound of a Tesla alarm. But let me start from the beginning, because this story is so much bigger than a bull destroying a car. 18 months before that morning, cancer took my wife Sarah. Fast and brutal. She left behind memories, a ranch that felt too quiet, and an empty kitchen chair I still cannot bring myself to move. Some mornings I would catch myself saving a funny newspaper story to tell her. Then remember, that grief was still raw when they broke ground on Willowbrook Heights. 200 cookie-cutter McMansions spreading across what used to be good farmland. And with that subdivision came Cordelia Whitmore, former corporate lawyer from California, free-term HOA president, white Tesla Model X with EcoFam vanity plates. She wore expensive yoga pants like armor and treated every neighborhood dispute like a hostile corporate takeover, complete with PowerPoint presentations and legal threats typed in Comic Sans. Because nothing says I am reasonable like suing your neighbors in a playful font. First came the noise complaints. My cattle were apparently too loud for suburban sleep schedules. Then certified letters about agricultural odors affecting property values. Then legal threats arriving every single Tuesday like unwelcome clockwork, demanding I relocate my livestock somewhere more appropriate for modern community standards. I ignored every single one. Then one cold October morning, I walked outside and found surveyors already on my land, spray painting bright orange X's on oak trees older than Cordelia's entire bloodline. No phone call, no permission, just confident trespassing with blueprints. I called out to the head surveyor. He barely looked up. "HOA infrastructure project, sir. We have proper documentation." That is when I spotted her, standing at my fence line, phone up, filming everything. That satisfied smile told me she believed she had finally found my weakness. She had no idea what was already in motion. I hired Mackenzie Reeves, an agricultural law attorney with 20 years defending farmers against exactly this kind of suburban land grab. We spread Cordelia's documents across her desk and started pulling threads. What we found made my blood pressure spike and Mackenzie's eyes light up like Christmas morning. That easement Cordelia was waving around like a magic wand. It specified emergency vehicle access only. Fire trucks, ambulances. Recreational use was not mentioned anywhere in the original county filing. And converting emergency access rights to a public bike path required entirely new documentation, environmental impact studies, public hearings, and notarized written landowner consent. Cordelia had forged my signature on the consent forms. Mackenzie held the document up to her office light and said, "This is either the worst forgery I have seen in 20 years of practice, or you have suddenly developed dyslexia that only affects your own name." But it got even worse. Cordelia's California law license had been suspended 3 years earlier for ethics violations, forged client signatures, and stolen escrow funds. She had been practicing law in Texas without state authorization. Every legal threat she had ever sent me was completely worthless. While Mackenzie built the legal case, I started my own project out in the pasture. 30 years of raising cattle had taught me something most people overlook. With enough patience and the right conditioning, you can train almost any behavior into livestock. Taurus was smarter than most people gave him credit for. I began playing recorded car alarm sounds during his feeding time every single day. Premium molasses treats every time he moved toward the noise instead of away from it. Day after day, session after session. After 3 weeks, I discovered something very useful. Taurus responded most aggressively to the specific high-pitched frequency produced by a Tesla Model X panic alarm. He would charge toward that sound from over 400 yards away. Meanwhile, Cordelia, realizing her legal threats were falling apart, switched tactics entirely. She launched what she called a community health initiative. Glossy flyers appeared in every mailbox in Willowbrook Heights. "Is your family drinking contaminated water?" Her claim, "My cattle were poisoning the creek and creating a public health crisis. She hired a man named Dr. Richard Peton, environmental consultant, who arrived in a white van with official-looking green lettering, took water samples, and produced a report claiming dangerous bacteria levels below my property. A basic internet search revealed that Dr. Peton's certified laboratory was his spare bedroom, equipment ordered from Amazon. His credentials were a business administration degree and zero scientific training. And his real name was Richard Whitmore, Cordelia's brother-in-law. I requested legitimate EPA testing. The real results showed my rotational grazing practices were actually improving creek water quality, while the HOA's excessive chemical fertilizers were polluting their own decorative pond. The local newspaper published the expose. Cordelia's environmental campaign collapsed completely. But cornered criminals do not retreat. They escalate. My cattle water troughs showed up contaminated with motor oil. Then while I was at the cemetery for Sarah's memorial service, someone slashed all 4 tires on my truck. She attacked me at my wife's grave. Let that sink in. Then hired security guards in black uniforms started patrolling my fence line, filming every visitor, following delivery trucks. They claimed I was an agricultural terrorism threat. 2 of my cattle turned up limping from pellet gun wounds. McKinsey subpoenaed their financial records. The security outfit was staffed by convicted felons recruited off Craigslist. Their paychecks came directly from the HOA emergency fund. Cordelia was stealing from her own neighbors to hire criminals to terrorize mine. That is when McKinsey called me and told me to sit down. Dutch, this was never about a bike path. Forensic accountants had uncovered a financial conspiracy that made everything click into place. Cordelia and her husband Brad had been systematically stealing from Willowbrook Heights for over 2 years. $890,000. Fake vendor contracts. Inflated maintenance bills. Fabricated emergency expenses. Brad's tech company was 3 weeks from bankruptcy. They needed my 47 acres to sell to a developer for $3.2 million. The bike path was never for recreation. It was the access road for another 200 McMansions. And then McKinsey told me the part that stopped my breathing entirely. 25 years ago, my late wife Sarah had filed the California State Bar complaint that destroyed Cordelia's legal career. Sarah's testimony about forged signatures and stolen client funds had ended Cordelia's law license and forced her out of California forever. Cordelia had found out where I lived. She had moved here on purpose, taken the HOA presidency on purpose, and deliberately routed that bike path through the oak grove where I scattered Sarah's ashes. This entire scheme was revenge against the dead woman. She has been planning this since she discovered where you lived, McKinsey said. Every single move was designed to torture Sarah's widower and steal the land where you scattered her ashes. The FBI had enough evidence for federal arrests on racketeering, wire fraud, conspiracy, and attempted bribery. And they wanted to execute those arrests at the annual HOA meeting, where Cordelia planned to announce her final land seizure for maximum public impact. I had 1 week to prepare. McKinsey coordinated with federal agents positioned throughout the community center audience with sealed arrest warrants. Local media was invited under the impression it was a major HOA transparency story. 300 residents packed the room. I installed a remote-controlled gate system using a smartphone app and hardware store components, completely legal for livestock management, operable from half a mile away. I positioned Taurus in his evening grazing spot, right alongside the community center parking lot, separated by a standard fence section. I made sure Cordelia would park exactly where she always parked, directly adjacent to that fence. Then I made sure Cordelia overheard staged phone conversations suggesting I was about to surrender my property rights. By Friday, she was posting on social media celebrating her coming victory, completely unsuspecting, exactly where I needed her. Monday evening, community center packed beyond capacity. Cordelia arrived in her white Tesla Model X, parked exactly where I predicted, and walked to that podium smiling, absolutely certain she was about to announce the greatest victory of her life. Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we celebrate a major victory for community progress and modernization. We have successfully resolved the agricultural obstruction that has prevented our bike path development. She clicked her presentation remote. Renderings of the completed bike path filled the screen. That is when McKinsey stood up from the third row, federal warrant folder visible in her hand. Mrs. Whitmore, Would you care to explain to this community how you forged my client's signature on those easement documents?" The room went completely still. Mackenzie activated the projector. Cordelia's forged signature appeared right beside my real one. The differences were obvious to every single person in that room. "Would you also like to explain how you embezzled $890,000 from this community's emergency fund to finance your personal land acquisition scheme?" HOA financial records filled the screen. Direct transfers straight into her personal accounts. Cordelia snapped. "These are fabricated lies. This is a conspiracy between a grieving widower and a corrupt attorney trying to destroy community progress." Special Agent Martinez stepped forward from the rear exit, FBI credentials raised. "Mrs. Cordelia Whitmore, you are under arrest for federal racketeering, mail fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, and attempted bribery of a law enforcement official." The room erupted. And then Cordelia made her final mistake. Instead of surrendering, she bolted for the exit screaming and frantically hammered her Tesla's panic button as she ran into the parking lot. That distinctive Tesla alarm tone rang out across the lot. I pressed my phone screen and opened the gate. Tourists had been waiting for exactly that sound for 3 months. 2,200 pounds of perfectly conditioned livestock came charging across that pasture, straight toward the source of his audio trigger. What happened next became instant legend. Cordelia's white Tesla Model X became the most expensive educational demonstration in HOA history. Tourists went through every panel of German engineering with calm, methodical precision, while 300 residents poured out of the community center to watch, their shocked gasps turning into laughter. Then applause. Agent Martinez stood beside the screaming Cordelia and said quietly, "Ma'am, your insurance does not cover acts of livestock justice." I walked calmly through the crowd, handed Cordelia the federal civil lawsuit papers, and delivered the one line I had been saving for months. "Progress waits for no bull, sweetie." 6 months later, Cordelia received 7 years in federal prison and $1.2 million in restitution. Brad got 5 years. Their Tesla, their McMansion, their bank accounts, all seized by the federal government. The community recovered every dollar she had stolen, with federal interest penalties on top. The new HOA board implemented a good neighbor charter. Vernon Jacobson, a retired engineer who had quietly supported me throughout, became the new president. The bike path was completed, rerouted around my property with my full voluntary cooperation, and a memorial bench was placed overlooking my pasture where visitors can watch the cattle graze in peace. I endowed the Sarah Kellerman Memorial Agricultural Education Fund with $200,000 from the legal settlements. It now provides scholarships to young farmers at Texas A&M University. The first recipient said to me, "Mrs. Kellerman would be proud knowing her memorial is helping preserve the agricultural traditions she defended." I donated the development rights on my 47 acres to the Texas Land Conservancy. This land will stay agricultural forever. Taurus has 15 million views across social media. His breeding rights now fund farm animal rescue organizations all across Texas. The state legislature passed the Kellerman Act, strengthening agricultural protection laws and increasing penalties for forged easement documents nationwide. And every evening, I sit on my porch and watch Taurus graze in the field where Cordelia tried to pave over my wife's memory. The light goes gold and quiet across the pasture. Sarah started all of this 25 years ago by simply telling the truth. She would have loved to see how it ended. If you are dealing with HOA overreach or someone trying to take what is rightfully yours, document everything, get real legal help, and never underestimate a well-trained bull. If this story had you cheering, hit like, drop a comment with where you are watching from, and subscribe. Because around here, the Karens always meet their match.